Hello everyone, Sidewind here. Today I'm going to be showing how I make a Vroid model look more masculine. Because by default, the male model in Vroid is quite feminine, especially the face. And when I was first using Vroid, I actually frequently got told when I just used the default face, like comments sort of like, isn't that a girl? And I found that with a couple of adjustments, you can get the face to look much more like a masculine character rather than the feminine that's default. So I will be later doing another video on aging a male character, but I'm going to start with showing how you get to a male character to begin with. Alright, so from the default model, the first thing I like to do is I tend to straighten the upper and lower eyelids some. This can sometimes create an odd sort of look, but you then need to fix it with a second trick. So basically, the default eye things here, the default sides, are pointed, which can make it so that it looks much more like a cat eyelid type thing. And you can also adjust a couple of these other ones, like you can reduce inner slant and reduce outer slant. You just experiment a little to get it to the point where it looks like the type of eye you're going for. And in my case, I tend to use Yu-Gi-Oh, like the original series, as my model for male characters. So that might be showing up here. Alright, so I'll start with the eyeliner here. So when you just start out here, you might notice the eyeliner is, well, you want to erase it immediately. And now you might notice the eye shape's a bit closer to what I was describing. I like to use just pure black. Other people do it differently. But then I tend to draw it like way oversized before I trim it down. Partially because I'm not super good at getting things first try when drawing. And like that, I'll admit it, it looks stupid right now. But when you cut down a little bit there, and then you also want to trim up this side, and then usually you want to go in the side here and trim it up. Make sure that you don't have any eyelashes. Then if you draw down a bit and meet with the original, and like you're gonna have to do some fiddling here. You almost never get it full try because Vroid's brush will kick you up there, you might notice, since I've done this a couple of times now. It can oftentimes be better to draw here on the side rather than on the actual model for this in particular. Alright, so there's just one little piece, yeah. So now there's still that upper eye, and you might want to add a bit of a, like, one option that you'll, like with Yu-Gi-Oh, you'll see this type of thing, just much smaller and closer to this. But essentially what I'm trying to do is emphasize the angular form. So in anime, male characters usually have very angular faces, and that's one of the main distinguishers between masculine and feminine anime characters. So if you're going for a masculine one, you generally are trying to get angles. And there's a lot more you can do with it, but I'll stop fiddling because otherwise we're going to be here all day to give an idea of the type of time span. Because of that. Okay. And note, like, that's very, very messy. You might want to adjust it and make it work better and suit the character more. It's just as is, I was trying to do that relatively quick. And then, right now, the other thing I note is the default is supposed to be a teenager, and it looks like a younger teenager. I generally reduce the eye size a bit to get more towards the older teenager look, because I've noticed a lot of male VTubers and male characters in general have a bit of an older look there's fewer people trying to go for the young teenage girl type look. As a male character, the equivalent, it just doesn't come up as much. So then eyes, I mean, you can kind of just use defaults if you want. I just always go in here and draw over them quick. And for eyes, quick tip, you always want to outline the edge. Like you might notice there isn't really an edge here at the moment. You just go in and outline it. You outline everything in Vroid, and that will help. And again, if I was like using this for something, I would be cleaning up these lines a lot more. I am not a get it right on first try kind of person, especially not with art. And I'm using mouse, so that can't help. And then one more thing here with the irises is sometimes, depending on how you draw it, you might extend or contract or move it down a little bit. Moving it down gives a crazy or younger look, whereas leaving it more towards where it is gives a more mature look. And then eye highlights, one, like I already have these made, but like one quick way you can show the difference between genders is quite simply you can swap which side the eye highlights are on. So this one is the feminine version. This would be one of the masculine. This is the default masculine. So if you're doing a comic or something with a lot of different characters, you'll notice that they'll just switch which side the highlights are on. This particular one I took from Full Metal Alchemist. It's got a little more variety than that, but it's a good starting point. Now for the eyebrows, and this one is actually pretty important. So like you might notice by default, men eyebrows in Vroid go longer. That's not always something you're going for here. And I'm going to make a redhead in this case, so I'm going to leave it as red. So again, we're going for angular. So here, you might go all the way that way. This creates a more angry looking character, or you might make it more flat. Now, to give a distinction between this and the feminine, you generally curve feminine eyebrows. But since this is a male character, we're not gonna do that. And in general, you can just draw eyebrows as you draw eyebrows. Now, one quick note as soon as this loads, So if you bring down the eyebrows, it makes them look either angrier or older, or both. If you bring them up, it makes them look younger or more disinterested. And if you can bring them in and out. You can use it to adjust your eyebrows as necessary. This will let you create a bigger arch. It generally, again, makes someone look angrier and tougher. You can contract it to make them look weaker and smaller. And the length, you can make them longer. Like if you're going for a Warcraft elf, you can go beyond the value. So Warcraft elf, you might do that. Well, yeah, that's the best I'm getting. So you might do that to get a Warcraft elf type look. Or you might reset everything to defaults. Make it so that there is less length to create a just smaller shape. Because male eyebrows go down and in and longer, you don't always want that with a male character. In this case, I'm going to go with the bit more tough guy, but not much. I'm less good at that. And quick note, usually you just avoid the eyelashes. Eyelashes will nearly always make a character look very feminine. Like this sample. Or this one. Like just in general. So you generally want to remove that. Now for the skin, I'm going to, again, like I'm just doing how I usually make a character, but I'm also going to be adding the masculine stuff. I sometimes put the various masculine things in different categories, which is what I'm going to show a little bit later here. So then to draw out the ears, you just draw them like normal. You usually want to give a bit of definition around them because otherwise it looks like a flat plane, which is usually not what you're going for. I mean, it might be, but you know. And you just fiddle till you get it where you want it. And that's as far as I'm going today. Alright, so that was a bit of a technical error. Let's be clear. Whoops. And then one thing I'm doing here is I like to reduce the mouse width a bit because the wider mouth, the wider mouth is what Vroid automatically does for male characters, but I tend to reduce it at least a bit, just quite simply because it's bigger. And if you want to see what any Vroid slider does, you can just do it to exaggerate it so it goes down and wider, which generally you don't want to do that. Now, this is probably the part that's most important. So first off, with male characters, you generally want to make it so that, well, there's kind of two directions you can go. This first, like, one thing you'd almost certainly want to do is widen that chin. Unless you're going for the type of, like, you can also go very, very angular. Where is it? And it can look masculine, it's just a little harder. I prefer the other method, but like you can play with a lot of different sliders here. In my case, what I tend to do is take that chin width slider and go up to a higher value, and then I slightly pull down the jawline so that you have a more extended type look. And if you're going younger or babyface, you will want to reduce chin length. You generally don't extend that in this case. But if you leave it like that, it can create a fairly masculine face. But there is one more thing I'm going to do here to finish it up. So I'm using the cheek function here because it's convenient. So what I'm going to do is take the skin color, go darker by a degree, take the slider up, and take the opacity down. Now I'm going to highlight the chin. You can choose how far up you go, but generally you might need to play with different opacities here. But I've noticed that when you do this, just need to show. Is it? I'm using the eraser. That was an oops. Don't use the eraser. But basically, when you go in here and draw a little bit along the chin, it can help with that angular type look again. And I've found that it helps a lot more than you would expect, because it gives definition under the face. And then going in, like I'm just cleaning up something, but another thing you can do here, you want the opacity different, but you play with it till you get it light enough. But sometimes you'll see people drawing explicit cheekbones on. This is more common with masculine characters again. So generally, either of those will create a more squarish shape, which is usually associated with masculine characters. I'm going to use just the one here. And then the nose, just like you vary it depending on what you're trying to do. In my case, I'm just going to draw my own nose. I do a different style than most anime drawers, however, so it is not particularly generally applicable. So then, sometimes nose shape can be useful for getting a more masculine character. Again, like masculine can equal boxy, and adding more definition above the nose also makes it look more masculine. And then one thing that's a don't do here, don't put on the like lip color. Don't do this. It does not help with masculine appearance. Generally what I do for male characters is just go in and I take the skin tone, move it slightly towards red, make it slightly darker, take the brush there, and then just draw a little bar underneath. You can also just use a darker color from the same skin tone to create a more muted look, but in that case you possibly want to put some on top as well to create a little more definition. The main goal with the lips is to make it so that if you're motion capturing, you can tell as the face moves a bit. So now with the body, since I'm using my own textures here, just drawing them out as we go, I'm just gonna quickly get the entire body to the same skin color. Alright, so then I'm going to use that darker tone again. You might notice I'm doing this a lot. And what I tend to do is add lines on the side of the face, well, the side of the neck in this case, which tend to increase a more, it's again, masculine. And then you sometimes want to go in here and try to, like there's a slider for this that makes it a lot easier, but you're going to show the Adam's apple. It's a little awkward texture-wise at the moment, but I'm going to try and clean that up. So now you have that thing sticking more out. It's got that toning from the shading at the moment, but I'm going to try and fix that. But essentially, you're going to try and make it look like there's a explicit shape there. The specific opacity depends on what you're trying to do, but you're essentially, like, what I'm trying to do is highlight it. It depends on how that shape is showing. If you're using default texture, you just increase it and it should do the job. But with non-default textures, you may want to reduce and expand and reduce and expand and just experiment with different things. Alright, so I'm not going to do the hands here, but one quick note there is do not put nail polish on unless you are doing it intentionally. Basically, nail polish will not help. And then with hairstyle, note this is actually something that my dad pointed out to me when I showed him a character I made. Basically, masculine characters are less likely to be all put together. Like, this is very, very boyish and unlikely. So whenever you're making a male hairstyle, one thing you might do is turn off mirror and add a couple of strands sticking off. Admittedly, my model does this as well. Like, I have messy hair too. But your goal is to make it look like just didn't bother to style his hair. Now, if the character would, you can. But in general, what I recommend, just as I do with female characters, is find real-life male celebrities and base your hair textures off their hair. So, like, there's a few cuts here that work well. In this case, I'm just gonna... And, like, this one's more masculine to me because it is, like, the messiness does show through. So I'm just gonna use this one for this model. It's a default. I do not generally recommend doing defaults. And at this point, I'm pretty much done. You can swap up the clothes and such to create a different look. I'm going to zoom back in on the face here and give a quick reminder of everything I did. So first off, you take the eyes and turn them into a more boxy shape instead of the more rounded shape. So in this case, what that is straighten the upper eye and straighten the lower eye. Then For the eyebrows, you make them angular and pointing out. Typically, you still make them thin, but you don't make them curve in towards the outside. You might draw on cheeks of some kind, as shown around here, and you add a darker colored emphasis to the chin by taking the brush and adding a dark colored coat here. You might also add some here to the area under the neck. And my Adam's apple drawing here was not very good, but you get the point. Then you might add a additional emphasis above the nose if you're doing the same type of nose as I am, and you do a small set of lips in a color relatively close to skin tone. And you also add these two strips on either side of the neck to provide emphasis again. So that is all for today. If you have questions or comments on this, I know this video has already gotten pretty long with just talking about how to make a male character. I'm going to create a separate video upcoming now, which will be for older male characters and younger male characters, because I've kind of been messing with that and focusing on it for around 6 months now. Thank you for watching.